Oye, Agnolota. In this video, we're going to take a look at something that is a very useful tool, but a little bit more complex for some of our analysis. Now, I've gone ahead and brought up STK, one of the ISAT scenarios. In this case, this was one that I happen to have handy. This is ISAT 1b1, the solar spotlight, with Luna, the moon, as the central object, and we are actually orbiting the moon in this scenario. But I brought this up mainly because it was convenient. I've computed an access report between one of the satellites and the target there. And we can see this report here. Now the report has a lot of great information, including the minimum duration, the maximum duration, the average, the mean duration, and the total. And so, but it also has all the timestamps in here. So there's a lot of useful information, some of which is already summarized for you, but some of the others might be something that could be useful to get your hands on in a spreadsheet, especially those timestamps. So in another video for STK, we will show this as well, but since it's pertinent here, I want to include it with this. It won't take very long. We've got a report here, and I want to get this report and copy it over easily into my spreadsheets. Well, up here, there's actually a picture of a little disk, an old school disk. This one's save, and then this one is actually save, and in the background of the disk is a green X, which is actually the notation for Microsoft Excel. And it's marked save as .csv. Now CSV is a comma separated value or comma separated variable. I forget which one it is. Anyway, we can click this. It's a common file type. Now in this case, it will bring up whatever the Active Directory is by default, and sometimes those can be hard to find. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to put it in my upload folder so that I can find it easily. I'm going to leave the name whatever the default is. It's got a description of what it is, Satellite Pro ISAT to Facility Tranquil Gardens, but you could change that if you really wanted to, but I'm just going to take that and click Save. Okay, now that I've actually got the report, I can minimize this, and let's go over and take a look at it first in Sheets. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I've got my tab here, Import CSV, and I want to go up to the Data tab. I'm going to go into Data, and I'm going to then say, let's say, no, I apologize. Yeah, I should have come better prepared on this. File. Import is what I'm looking for. I believe it's data in the Excel, so my apologies on that. In this case, I could look for these values in my drive, but I'm going to go over to Upload, which is generic, not actually my upload folder, but I'm going to click Browse, and then, because I have everything that I intend to upload in my upload folder, I can go to my desktop, go to Upload, and then I can see it here, Satellite Pro ISAT to Facility, and I'm going to double click that. It'll take just a moment. And I've got some options. It says import location. I could create a new spreadsheet, insert new sheet, replace spreadsheet, replace current sheet, which I think is what I want to do. Maybe I'm going to regret doing this. Or append to current sheet. I'm going to put that here. And then separator type, detect automatically can be a little bit tricky, but usually pretty good when it comes to sheets. Convert text to numbers, dates, and formulas is also really good. So I'm going to click import data. And here we go. It's thrown it into my current sheet. And I've got here my access, my number of accessees, and it's pulled up basically the entire thing and spread each of these out in each of their columns so that I can work with them individually. Now real quick, I'm going to verify some things that we've got. First off, I'm going to say max, and I'm going to do equals max value of, I'm going to drag down, and I'm going to check this. The max value is 0.394, and if I come down here, our max duration is 0.394. I'm also going to check our min duration, so I'm going to do min, and then do these. This is me basically recreating things that are already in the sheet. Not that you would necessarily need them, but it's showing that we can work with these numbers the same as STK summarizes. We've also got the mean. In this case, that's called the average in Excel and Sheets instead of the mean, but they're both giving the same thing. So we'd have 0.174 and some change. And here's where the spreadsheet that is given to you by STK may actually do a little bit of either rounding or cutting off of the numbers. If you need extra high precision, you may be able to get more doing this. And then the total duration is the sum of all of these. Now we've talked about all these functions before, but I'm going to show them real quick, and that they're returning the correct numbers. 7.314, which is exactly what it says here. Now that's great. But those are all things that are actually already in the STK report. So what are things that aren't necessarily in the STK report? Well, a good example of that might be a count if. We talked about that before. I could do a range where I check all of our things, and then I could say count if they are greater than, let's go with our average, which was right here. Oops. Okay, fine. Let's see. I'm just going to type it in 0.174 because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. We've got 20 of these accesses that are greater than the average. Well, there are 42 total, so it makes sense that about half of them would be greater than that. That's where the median would actually be a better indicator. We should end up with the median being a nice 21 if we were to use that. The average can be offset by outliers. Okay, but that's one thing that we can do. The other thing that I want to show you here, which is very, very useful, and by my consideration, one of the biggest advantages for Sheets, is I can do the following. Gap. Now, what we've got here is the start time and the end time for one of our contacts between the satellite and the ground station. It has, this is our start time, this is our end time, and this is the duration of that contact in hours. Well, I've got the gap, I jumped straight to that, but let's actually double check our duration. So I'm going to type in duration, and I'm going to do the following. Well, my duration would be my final time minus my initial time. So I did equals, and I'm clicking on these things here, and I'm going to hit these here. Okay, now it's going to look a little weird because this doesn't seem quite right. My duration is supposed to be 0.394, not 0.0164. But here's the thing. I want to point this out. Since we have the date and time on this, when you do one minus the other, it does it in days. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that value. That's the difference in days. It was 0.016 or whatever it was. But I want it in hours, so I'm going to multiply this by 24. And I end up with 0.3939, in other words, 0.394. Look, I'm getting a better measurement or thing to work with of my durations. Now, once again, that is just showing the same thing that STK is showing, maybe to more significant figures, whether that's useful for you or not. But I'm showing you how you can get these numbers yourself in case you, one, need to double check them, or two, you need to come over here to the gap. What if you don't necessarily need the duration from the beginning to the end, but you're worried about how long is in between each of these? Well, here's what I can do. The gap between this instance and the one before it, I could take as equal to, open parentheses, the start of the second one minus the end of the first one. Now, once again, that's in days, so I need to finish this up by multiplying it by 24, and I could get that here we have the time between my first contact and my second contact. The gap is actually 2.43 hours. And now I have a list of all the gaps that I've got in my contacts. We can see that they get a little bit bigger. They're starting to climb up to about 2.75 based on the orbits that we've got. But now I can tell how much time, not only how much time I'm in contact, but how much is between those. And let's say that I don't want them in hours. Maybe I need that in minutes. Well, instead of times just 24, multiplying days by 24 will turn it into hours. I could then also multiply it by 60 and turn it into minutes. So here's the number of minutes between contacts. We've got about 2.5 hours or so. We can see that this one ends at a little after 3 a.m. and this one begins at about maybe 5:30. And so we do have about 2.5 hours gap in between those. Now, there's also a place in STK where you can pull the gap report as well. But let's say that you have to deal with multiple targets, like the satellite as one thing, and then when it talks to one ground site, which would be one report, and talks to a different ground site, which might be a different report. You could import both of those in here and then sort them so that you could actually see how they interact with one another. Okay, before I get too much in the weeds, let's go ahead and see how this looks in Excel. I'm going to go ahead and zoom this in a little bit so that you can see it a little bit more. But on this one, here's where we need to go to the Data tab, which is why I was a little confused earlier. Let's see. One option here is from text/CSV. So I'm going to click on that and hopefully give it a moment. Please tell me my computer's not crashing. There we go. And now I need to find where I saved that file. Well, luckily, I do a lot of things in my upload folder. Being able to organize your files is very important. And I'm going to select this, the Satellite Pro ISAT. Now, before it brings it in, it's going to ask me, okay, we want you to identify a little bit of information on this. Delimiter says colon, and it looks at a glance like everything's going to work, but I know from experience that this isn't actually what I want. So I'm going to do the drop down, and I believe it's a comma. Now when I do that, see how it looks a little bit better? We've got accesses all evenly spaced out. We've got our start times, our stop times, and our duration. Let me go back to colon, and we can see that, oh, this time it just showed up where everything seems to be next to each other. So we definitely want the comma. Okay, now I'm going to do load, and it loads in. It looks like it automatically applied a query table on it. There's some cool stuff that Excel is doing to try and make things much easier and faster, but we end up with the exact same outcomes. We could go through and do the same math that we did before. We've got our durations here, which is often what you're looking for, but we've also got a few other options. And the last thing I'm going to bring up is this. This one's a little bit trickier, and this is why I said this is one of the reasons we like sheets. If I were to do, say, the duration, and I could do exactly what we saw earlier. I could take my stop time, click on stop time, minus my start time, and I end up with it actually in a date format, which is harder for me to work with mathematically. On Excel, you're going to need to go in, right-click, and do Format Cells. It will automatically put it into the same format that the data that it's pulling is. I want this actually in just a number, so I'm going to go ahead and take that maybe to 3 decimal places. Here we go. So now I've got 0.016. Once again, that is the duration in days. So I'm going to take equals this times 24, and we get our 0.393 or 0.394 hour duration. So here's one extra step that you kind of have to do in Excel. You can also go through and drag these down just as you could in Sheets. And remember, I've mentioned it before, it's actually a little square in Excel instead of a circle. And then I can also drag this one down, and I can get all of my durations. Now, you can also go in and you could make the gaps the same way. I'm not going to show that because I think at this point you've seen everything that you need. But being able to export CSVs from STK and many actual resources, in my physics class, my students actually work with smart carts, and the software there also allows you to export the data as a CSV. So this is a way that they could incorporate and load that data into a spreadsheet where they could do a lot of work with it. So CSVs are a pretty standard file type and a really good one with which to work. Oh, one final thing. If we wanted to make it where we didn't just have all the numbers here, I can right-click, go to Format Cells, and under Number, I could say 2 or 3 decimal places to clean this up a little bit. I didn't show that in Excel, I don't think, so in case you were waiting with bated breath for that. There you go. All right, hopefully that was useful for you. Until next time.